We all got knocked into the water into different ways. I didn't see them again. And I continued to float down, up and down through the water until I got trapped in a tree. I continued to look for them, but I heard nothing. I saw my mom screaming for my son at one point, and again, the last I heard from them was screams and screaming for Jesus.
My heart breaks for this mom who lost family members, and at the same time, though, these family members didn't lose their faith. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to unpack and maybe look at the weather-related problems that we've been having in a more Catholic pastoral way. We're going to try to figure out how natural these disasters are, because there's some evidence to suggest otherwise, that perhaps that this is not simply the fruit of the natural world, but the work of broken human hands. And we're also going to look at how we are responding to these crisis situations, either with boots on the ground from the people who live there and how they're helping one another, and also to take a critical look at what our government, which is supposed to be caring for these people in these situations, how is the federal government taking a look at this? Because I think, unfortunately, politics is at play, and we know when that happens, nothing good happens. But before we jump into it, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Let us know what your thoughts are in regards to this whole weather-related worldwide problem we're having. And also, please know that when you do leave those comments, it helps us to get the message of this video out beyond the suppressions of the algorithms on the internet. And then also make sure that you go to our Patreon community, and if you are able, please support us, because it's the only way that we can continue to do the work that we are doing. So go to patreon.com/The Father Leo Show. So let's just jump right into this with my very, hopefully helpful, but little lengthier commentary on what's happening in our worldwide weather problems. So I came across this video of this young man named Dylan Page, And Dylan Page has a very popular YouTube channel and Instagram he's a social media influencer. And he did something that was a little shocking. He actually pointed out all of the problems that the world is having weather-wise. Check this out.
I don't know how we're not hearing about this more, because I just found out today that Brazil is facing one of their worst floods in their history right now, and I didn't even know about it. I mean, just look at this before and after, and just pay attention to the massive gap between the bridge and the water level. And now, look at that. Not only has the water level surpassed the bridge, but the surrounding areas are completely underwater. Just pause for a second and look at that picture. I've even been seeing videos of entire towns completely underwater, to the point where the only thing you can see is the tops of some buildings. I mean, I don't know if it's just me, because I'm looking at all of this every day. But just in the last few weeks alone, Dubai was hit with the heaviest rainfall since their records began. The US had more than 300 tornadoes in April, which is more than double the average, and the second highest on record. More than 220 people died in Kenya's floods last week. China just issued a once-in-a-century flood warning. Oh, and had hail the size of freaking grapefruits. Peru was just hit with the first cyclone in over 40 years. And Pakistan just had their wettest April in over 60 years. Oh, then, of course, now we have Brazil. And those are all just the ones I've heard of.
Wow. Our focus in America is in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Hilton, the double whammy after Milton, that is. And first of all, my heart goes out to all of the people who lost loved ones. People's lives were lost in numbers that are staggering. And unfortunately, we're not getting a full account of anything because the situation is so grave. Our hearts really go out. Our prayers and our thoughts, which, by the way, are not useless. They are truly forms of encouragement, especially to those who are still alive, dealing with the destruction of their livelihood. Their whole lives are, in a sense, upended, and they feel somewhat abandoned by everything. And when you take a look at the natural disasters around the world, it just seems like things have ramped up to an incredible level. But what I find interesting is that, unlike previous situations, we don't have the same people droning on about how these are climate change problems. people are saying it, but they're not as vocal about it on the news. Maybe it's because it's too soon, too gauche, or maybe it's because if we start really looking at the causes of these weather issues, we might find ourselves down a rabbit hole. And I hate doing this, but sometimes you just have to ask Alexa. And guess what Alexa says? Check this out.
Alexa, did North Carolina use cloud seeding during Hurricane Helene?
Yes. North Carolina has been cloud seeding during Hurricane Helene. Scientists injected silver iodide into the hurricane wall to steer the hurricane in another direction.
Oh my goodness.
So, look, that's Alexa. Alexa also seems to know who the presidents are going to be in the next several years. It's almost as if artificial intelligence, which is really acquired information. That's what AI should stand for, acquired information. And whoever is feeding the information to Alexa or any AI source is going to basically be playing God. And we do know, however, that artificial intelligence just scours information on the web, whether it's very public or not, and this is the answer that it came out. But this is not the only issue. And you're probably going to think, man, Father Leo, you need to put on your little tinfoil or aluminum foil hat and stop being such a conspiracy theorist. Okay, so all I can say is that most conspiracy theories are eventually proven true. And while people may not like the fact that someone asks questions, all I'm doing is trying to help myself, and hopefully you, understand what possibly could be going on. Now, some people will say that this is just one of those freakish once in 1,000-year storms that we've had in North Carolina or in other parts of the world. But it just seems that the gravity is excessive. And while this may have happened 1,000 years ago, first of all, we can't blame global warming for it because back 1,000 years ago, we didn't have all of the stuff that was manufactured by human hands. We didn't have coal development. We didn't have, CO2 productions from exhaust with cars. We didn't have enough cow flatulations, which is what, the whole climate cult activists would claim. But what's interesting is that the climate cultists are not as vocal about these situations, and we have to understand why. Is it because if we start looking into this, we would find ourselves down a rabbit hole and realize that maybe this isn't so natural after all? I mean, when a volcano erupts, you actually see a tremendous amount of climate weather-related problems. And scientists know that you can mimic those things. And that's where we just have to understand that science, without conscience, without a conscience, can maybe create problems. This is a little news source from a few years ago.
That cloud seeding is booming. They anticipate at least another 200 ground cloud seeding machines to be put in before next season.
Ginger, this is such a cool concept, but is it too good to be true? I mean, how do we know that the chemicals that they're spraying from the air aren't bad for us or the planet?
The good news is we've been doing this since the 1940s and 50s. Other countries do it, and there have been a lot of research projects that have shown that the silver iodide, for example, is not found. It's negligible once it gets down to ground level.
So, again, I don't want to be too skeptical, but is there anything wrong with manipulating nature like this?
I think that's the question we should have asked when we built every single parking lot and every rooftop. We have been manipulating weather with us for a very long time.
Okay, that's the kind of nonsense that drives me crazy. They're basically saying that if we build a parking lot, we're messing with weather. No, they're shooting tons of iodine and other metals in the air, and they are able to create weather where weather wasn't found before. So I'm sorry, just because this person might sound articulate and have a degree in something doesn't mean that that logic and common sense should be suspended. We know that people are able to create storms. And because, scientists can manipulate the atmosphere and create storms. I mean, that's kind of what we sometimes do even on ski in ski resorts, where if they know that they don't have a good snowfall and they need to produce more snow, they'll do things to manipulate more snow, whether it be just blowing kind of cold water in the air and it freezes and it creates snow, or in some cases, for example, in Dubai, remember a couple months ago or several months ago, there was major flooding in the middle of the desert. Well, they even told us that it was cloud seeding that they've done to manipulate the atmosphere in order to produce rain. And sometimes, guess what? There are just some things you can't control, like the weather, or when you think you do, you lose control. Could that have been the case with regards to at least America's hurricane problems? Well, let's take a look.
Climate change. And now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, I mean, lasers really to change the weather?
That's right. We physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, by firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
This fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics. You can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops and the consequences of famine?
For floods, for agriculture, farmers, and flooding, and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
This is the stuff that, in a way, frightens me, because it sounds to me like there could be manipulation. And I am not expert enough, but there are enough reports that claim that there are unique things that planes have been doing in Florida, as well as in the southeastern states like Tennessee and the Carolinas. And again, nobody knows, but there's just some strange stuff that's happening around the world because this technology could contribute to it. And what does that mean for us? It means that we should start looking at this more seriously. I am not making any claims. All I'm doing is reviewing news reports from back in the day. That last one was, I think, like 9 years ago. So these things have, the technology has certainly improved since then. Does that mean that this is what caused these massive, out of almost like biblical proportionate, catastrophic events that we now are saying that we need to create a new hurricane level of Hurricane 6 because Milton was so strong, it exceeded Hurricane 5 requirements, so to speak. How is this happening? Are we doing something so differently? And especially in America, where our carbon emissions are lower now than in our history, really, where we have much cleaner air because of the technology that's made it possible to burn fossil fuels in a more clean way. And besides, CO2 isn't terrible. It's actually good for plants. It's plant food. So we look at these things and wonder, is this the manipulation or trying to control weather, but losing control? And then there are reports that somehow these areas that are most affected just happen to be some of the largest deposits of lithium and natural minerals, like outside of Asheville, that maybe the government wants to, eventually cease because it's been declared a disaster zone. I mean, we still don't know what happened truly in Maui because I think experts have already claimed, but no one wants to talk about it publicly, that those wild fires didn't seem so wild. They seem very premeditated in a way with what they burned, what areas were burned, and how the fire acted wasn't so natural. It would burn so many things, but not blue materials, anything the color blue, whether it be that famous bar's blue umbrellas that stood or the blue cars that remained while all the other cars were burned or melted to the ground. A heat far exceeding natural fires, natural forest fire temperatures. And then, of course, we didn't hear much about the wildfires in Chile either, because Chile and Lahaina, these two hubs that were rich in so many ways, and we know that there were government or non-government agencies that would have loved to use those lands to build smart cities, but the residents didn't want to give it up. And now look at these situations. The residents almost have no chance to give it up. So what are we to make of this? Again, is it a problem for me to actually ask the question? I'm not saying that I know the answers, but I do think that it is important for anyone who is smarter than me, more skilled than me, more aware of what's really going on, to maybe jump in the conversation. I'd love to have that with you, but why does it seem that we're not allowed to ask these questions? Especially knowing that it seems that the biggest question that we should be asking is, how do we actually help these people? Because it doesn't look like there's much happening to help them. So I want to kind of shift gears from asking questions about whether or not these things are natural disasters. Because if it is truly a natural disaster, then there's nothing we can do about it, except for deal with it after the fact. But now let's jump to what has happened after the fact. How are we actually dealing with the aftermath? Well, according to FEMA, they're doing a great job. Are they really? Let's take a listen to one of the FEMA directors.
We have over 4,500 people on the ground that have been here since before the storm made landfall, working side by side with our state counterparts in the communities with our local officials. And all I hear on the ground is gratefulness and compassion and a level of unity to make sure that we're getting people what they need. It's frankly disappointing that we're having to deal with this narrative. And the fact that there's a few leaders that are having a hard time telling the difference between fact and fiction is creating an impedance to our ability to actually get people the help they need.
So my heart goes out to the people who are actually helping these victims. And this FEMA director is claiming that they're doing a great job. Even though there's a lot of misinformation about the assessment, according to her, people are grateful for FEMA and the work that they've done. Well, I can tell you that on social media, because we have to take that seriously. And why? Because social media is not controlled by mainstream media. These are where just creators like you and me, we can actually go out there and we can actually share the reality as we're experiencing it. Might it be the full truth? Nope, but it is at least what people are experiencing, and they're just telling their story online. According to many people online, FEMA has not done a good job. In fact, they even claim that FEMA is being counterproductive and almost contra the help that, for example, the locals are doing. We're hearing story after story, including this one. And kind of my heart breaks, but this is just one of hundreds of examples that I've seen online. I'm not on social media every minute, but just as I'm scrolling through, whether I'm at the airport or just waiting for someone, I'll scroll through and find out if there's anything happening. And we're hearing nothing but just complaints about how FEMA seems to be completely abandoning them or acting against those ground teams, volunteers, locals who care about their neighbors, trying to get supplies, and they're being blocked along the way. And so this is just an example of one person and her experience.
My name is Casey Webb. I'm from Swannanoa, North Carolina. I lost everything I have. I just did an inspection with FEMA last night. They told me that I was denied and post-dated my letter for the 5th of October when my inspection was done on the 4th. They have not seen receipts. They have not seen pictures or anything of the things that were in my home and denied me. We have still failed to receive a $750 check. The rooms that FEMA wants you to go stay in during the time of your disaster relief are in Newport, Tennessee, which they sent 500 people there and then it flooded. I will be in Asheville all day long. If anybody wants to link up with me and talk about what's going on, inbox me and let me know. This is disgusting.
Okay, so I mean, obviously this is just a person who's trying to build a network. We're hearing on the ground how there are actually these places where people can go and get a hot bath or get themselves cleaned up, but they require them to wear flip-flops or to wear, bathroom slippers or foot protection gear. Now, these people don't even have gear. They don't have flip-flops. Everything was lost in a fire. There are other reports that that somehow there were Black Hawk helicopters and they were completely disrupting. They would kind of fly so low that the helicopter blades would create such a wind effect and it would kind of blow off all the supplies of people who were just trying to organize things. Now, that claim was the government trying to just disrupt local people trying to help their neighbors? Well, thankfully, from what I gather, the North Carolina National Guard took responsibility for it and said that our pilots made a mistake and that those pilots are now grounded. They're punished for doing something stupid. What we are discovering is that when a government agency like FEMA gets involved, it is an impossible task for them to do it on their own. But I also know that there are going to be some people that are working in FEMA who have their hearts and minds and souls in the right place to go and just help people. But then it's also a big bureaucratic machine, and it makes it very difficult to move quickly, which is why you need the mobilization of local people who know the area and know their neighbors. And they also have an invested interest in helping, and yet they're being denied. And that's coming from a lot of people, where people wanted to bring supplies. I know people myself who wanted to bring supplies, and they're like, no, you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. And so they will sequester it. And then we hear that people on the ground aren't getting the help they need. I mean, the people of Lahaina in Hawaii, they talked about how they never received any real help from their government administration, which, by the way, is what they're required to do. I mean, the fact that this current administration has sent over up to $115 billion to other countries, and even billions more dollar to another country, say like in Lebanon, for example, or billions of dollars to Ukraine, or billions of dollars to support these wars. What's frustrating to me is that they are now just simply saying we can give you up to $750. $750. And what I'm also hearing is that maybe that $750 isn't even really just money to help them with basic needs. There are people who claim that if you read the fine print, that it's actually a loan instead. And that somehow the government, if you don't pay that back, the government can garnish things from you, perhaps even your land. This is the stuff that's out there. I cannot confirm that, but I can say this. I looked at the website, and honestly, I couldn't figure out how to work it. I couldn't figure out how to, I mean, I'm not the smartest guy with computers, but honestly, it made, the website was so difficult to maneuver. On top of that, I'm thinking, how would people be able to do that if the internet is so spotty? They don't have probably enough cell service or even battery to be able to do that much scrolling. And I guess it's just even more sad to me that this has now become a political problem, to the point where Governor DeSantis, for example, in face of hurricanes, incredibly powerful, probably the most historical hurricane Florida's ever faced, he claims that he's been in touch with the Biden administration. Biden even says that he was doing a good job, that Governor DeSantis was doing a good job. But then all of a sudden we hear Ms. Harris's voice, and how she claims that her and DeSantis are bickering about whether or not he returned any phone calls. And so these strange political problems kind of make you think, who's right here? But it's sad to know that politics has entered into this whole thing and truly has messed everything up. And so this is an example of what happens when humanity, the broken side of humanity, gets in the way.
You know, moments of crisis, if nothing else, should really be the moment that anyone who calls themselves a leader says they're going to put politics aside and put the people first. People are in desperate need of support right now, and playing political games with this moment in these crisis situations, these are the height of emergency situations, it's just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship instead of doing the job that you took an oath to do, which is to put the people first.
Madam Vice President. And I've been in touch with both FEMA and the president, as well as marshaling all our state agencies and working to support our local communities. And so for Kamala Harris to try to say that my sole focus on the people of Florida is somehow selfish is delusional. She has no role in this. In fact, she's been vice president for 3.5 years. I've dealt with a number of storms under this administration. She has never contributed anything to any of these efforts. She has no role in this process. I'm in contact with the President of the United States. I'm in contact with FEMA director. I'm obviously managing all our state agencies. We're supporting all our local government. And I will say this, I've had storms under both President Trump and President Biden, and I've worked well with both of them. She's the first one who's trying to politicize the storm, and she's doing that just because of her campaign.
There you have it. Again, when humanity, the broken side of humanity, gets involved, either in the manipulation of weather to control it, or when it's out of control, then we try to control the aftermath and the problems. This is the kind of nonsense. You know, I will trust that Governor DeSantis is being honest, that he is talking with the president, with the FEMA directors. Why wouldn't he? And the question has to be asked of Ms. Harris's campaign. Why would she bring up this seemingly made up problem and trying to show her strength and just using these bellicose talking points of bias platitudes of saying, you know, this is a time to put people first and not for political gamesmanship. But what's her role in all of this? Now, some people say, well, where is she? She's in the middle of campaigning. But could she have done something to support these people? Well, I know that there were some photo ops done there, and that was about all. But I want to just say that I'm not taking a side. I'm saying that I think that Ms. Harris is representing the broken side of humanity in the way she's been responding to all of this. She's the one making it political. How do I know that? Because President Biden even said it himself with this.
The governor of Florida has been cooperative. He said he's gotten all that he needs. I talked to him again yesterday, and I said, no, you're doing a great job. It's all being done well. We thank you for it. And I literally gave my personal phone number to call. So I don't know, there was a rough start in some places, but every governor from Florida to North Carolina has been fully cooperative and supportive and acknowledged what this team is doing. And they're doing an incredible job.
Okay, so President Biden claims that he's been in touch with all of the presidents, all of the governors. So that basically debunks what Vice President Harris was saying. So who do we believe? And as far as Governor DeSantis, and this is again prior to Milton, so this is being recorded prior to Milton, saying that he's been in touch with FEMA directors and in touch with the president. He never needed to talk to Vice President Harris. Why would she bring it up? You see that there's just some craziness in all of this. And so where does that leave us? Well, number one, don't be afraid to ask questions. Truly, is the level of destruction from these storms, are they natural? Are they natural? We've got to not be afraid to ask those questions. And if someone says, man, Father Leo, you're just being a conspiracy theorist, I don't really care. Am I not allowed to ask questions? I think we are. I think we demand to ask ourselves, how did it get to be this bad? And if it's because of cow flatulation, which I seriously doubt, because remember that these things could have happened 1,000 years ago, before there were that many cows and cars. We still have to ask the question, how did these storms get this bad? Are these storms natural? Or have there been manipulation? Because, these news reports prior showed that, yeah, we can control the weather. But that's where the problem is. The second thing that I want to ask is, if people can control the weather, do they think they can now play God? Do they think they can play God and do what they can to show their power in controlling the weather? Because guess what? Weather's going to do what the weather's going to do. If it's going to rain and you try to control it, it can do even more damage than you even thought you were trying to do good. Like, we just want to make sure there's more water in Florida. Really? The state is surrounded by water. Why do we need more? They have enough storms. Why would we need to create more? If but perhaps to create problems a couple weeks prior to a major election. Thirdly, where are all of the climate cultists? Where is their level of chiming and griping and whining about these things? Why has there been such a strange amount of silence on their part? Why? Fourthly, the disinformation, it is out there. The fake news, it is out there. We have to be careful. Now, I just asked questions about where do these storms come from? But now we have to ask the question, who is the best people to help and how can they help? Well, we know that, fine, there's a lot more money in federal government, although according to this current administration, they don't have money for FEMA disasters. They have money for foreign wars, but they don't have them for American natural disasters, which is strange because I thought that's whole the purpose of the federal government is not only to protect our borders, which they haven't done a good job of, but also to protect the people from natural disasters or to provide aid for them. These are the things where our monies that are collected from taxes, this is where it should be going. Not to fund abortion, not to fund transgender surgery, not to fund foreign wars. But yet that's where all the monies are going. Oh, by the way, we have people who cross the borders illegally getting more than $750 each. So that's a question that we need to ask. Who is the best person to help? Well, the answer is the neighbor who loves you, or the neighbor who is called to love. That's you and me. And so I don't know exactly how we can help. I do know that there are some people who just made their way down there with kind of truckloads of food and, non-perishable foods, as well as water and supplies and such like that. And that might have helped to a degree. But then there's got to also be some emotional help for people who've lost lives, lost loved ones, as well as lost their livelihood. There's going to be an ongoing need for help, an ongoing need. And I'm just so grateful that there are some good Samaritans out there. There's, if anything, one thing that I know we have to do, and that is continue to turn to Jesus. Just turn to Jesus. And this is a unique story, and I'm going to close with this because it's worth telling.
Got my son to the highest point of the house that I could. But once the house detached, we ran into power lines and we ran into trees, which knocked us off into the water. That's when I went under and I lost sight of my mom and my son. I could hear them screaming. My dad was trying to fight for his life on water. He is, 73 years old, as my mother was. My son was 7. He didn't know how to swim. So my dad had to grabbed onto a branch or something and was holding on. But the last thing that I heard from my son was he was screaming for Jesus. And he was saying, "Jesus, please save me." That's the last words I heard out of my son's mouth. And that was when we separated. We all got knocked into the water into different ways. I didn't see them again. And I continued to float down, up and down through the water until I got trapped in a tree. I continued to look for them, but I heard nothing. I saw my mom screaming for my son at one point, and again, the last I heard from them was screams and screaming for Jesus.
Oh. My heart breaks for this mom who lost family members. And at the same time, though, these family members didn't lose their faith. Christ is going to be the only one who's going to help make sense of this. How? I don't know. He's going to reveal a sense of hope, a sense of peace to the victims, also a sense of strength for those who are providing care, and hopefully a sense of justice for people if they had a part in creating these storms, or if they had a part in making it hard for their neighbors to provide the care. I pray that Jesus will also provide a sense of justice. This has been a tough one for me, a tough episode for me to do, because my emotions are just about everywhere. And you kind of feel helpless. But the only thing we can do is just scream out to Jesus for help, that Jesus will help all of those in need. May he spare all of those who have died and bring them to eternal life. And may God bring a sense of justice so that we can prevent terrible things from happening. And if terrible things happen, that we won't prevent good from helping to build healing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Leave your comments and join us on our Patreon community at patreon.com/thefatherleo show. God bless you. Stay hungry for God.